Ordinals. Why are they so polarizing? Some Bitcoiners are for them, some are against it. What is it? Well, we're going to dive into that right now and see if we can make heads or tails of this argument. Welcome back, everyone. We are going to dive into the latest thing that has everybody up in arms on Bitcoin Twitter. We're going to take a look at ordinals. To put it simply, people are just suggesting that it's NFTs on Bitcoin. And of course, you've got proponents, right, of doing this because we've already seen them start to pop up. And then you have people who are against it, saying that it's an attack on Bitcoin. Look, you know what? We're going to go through a series of data points and, we'll see what we come up with at the end. I got to be honest, as of right now, I'm not 100% sure, but maybe after we go through all of this, we'll see. Maybe my opinion changes. Who knows? Here we go. This is an article from the block, and we are going to take a look at this just to help give us a bit of a background. So, what are Bitcoin NFTs, ordinals, and how do they work? Bitcoin is no stranger to NFTs, but it's not been much of a friend to them either. That could be all changing as a new kind of Bitcoin-based NFT called ordinals emerge. The first blockchain-based NFTs were made in 2014 on Counterparty, a protocol built on Bitcoin. The biggest collections that came out of this were Spells of Genesis in 2015 and Rare Pepes in 2016. When Counterparty was taking off, it led to a debate on whether this was good use of the Bitcoin blockchain. Using full nodes as dumb data storage terminals is simply abusing an all-volunteer network resource, Jeff Garzik, then a Bitcoin core developer, said. The core issue is the use of what's called the op return function that can be used to store arbitrary data in the blockchain. Bitcoin had a limit that meant you could effectively only store 40 bytes of data using this function, but in 2016 it was increased to 80 bytes. The 2017 upgrade, SegWit, made it 75% cheaper to store data with this function, while the 2021 upgrade, Taproot, made it around 10% cheaper and easier to store this data in single transactions as opposed to spreading it among multiple ones. Anyone can now store as much data as they like with this function as long as they're willing to pay for it, and the total block size remains under 4 megabytes. Ordinals is still basically a bit of a workaround, but it provides a new way to store NFTs on the Bitcoin blockchain now that it's easier and cheaper to store larger amounts of data. There are two things that stand out when it comes to ordinals NFTs. First, they are comprised entirely of on-chain data. This means that the actual image of the NFT itself is stored on the blockchain. The second standout is that NFTs are connected with individual Satoshis. That's different from Ethereum, where NFTs are more natively supported and each one has its own token. What are people using ordinals for? Someone paid about $2 a pop to mint a copy of the 100 Ether Rocks, one of the oldest Ethereum NFT projects on Bitcoin. Each individual NFT has to be minted on its own transaction for its own fee, unlike Ethereum, where many NFTs can be minted in one go. So you can already see it. It's going to cost a lot more to create NFTs or ordinals on Bitcoin than it did in Ethereum. Which, doesn't really surprise me anyways, because as I've said in the past multiple times, you can easily go look up what it costs to make an ERC token. I can tell you 4 or 5 years ago, it cost about $20 to $25 to create yourself any shitcoin you want and, give it a hard supply cap and all that crap, but it makes no difference because who cares? Anyways, okay. Other ordinal NFTs include the Nyan Cat meme, pictures of AI-generated Bitcoin clocks, Rare Pepe cards, Bored Apes, and the original Dogecoin meme, but so far these are all unofficial. Spoiler alert. Illegitimate Bitcoin transactions. The long-standing compromise on transaction size is how Taproot and SegWit inadvertently blew it up, and the nascent NFT protocol emerging in its wake. The purpose of Bitcoin transactions has been a topic of long-standing debate since the formative days of Bitcoin. Is Bitcoin primarily for financial transactions, or should Bitcoin instead be a secure distributed data store for everything from app data to domain names? This controversy has been quiet for years based on a careful compromise that I will describe. However, a design quirk of Taproot has allowed a new NFT protocol called Ordinals to emerge that upends prior limits. Here, I will describe the early debate of what constitutes a legitimate Bitcoin transaction, the negotiated limits established with op_return, and how SegWit and Taproot allowed Ordinals to end run these limits. This is an area of emerging controversy within Bitcoin, and my goal is to lay out the diverging points of view and put them in historic context. Now, before I keep going, I just want to apologize for the highlighting. I don't know what happened on this page, but for whatever reason, I think I might need a new highlighting software. So just bear with me though. We're gonna dive into it, but I do apologize about like some of the highlight pieces that just wouldn't stick. So here we go. In 2010, there was a fierce debate on Bitcoin Talk over a proposal to support a DNS service on Bitcoin called BitDNS. I had never heard of that before. This proposal advocated for website domain names to be hosted on Bitcoin and thereby benefit from its decentralized trustlessness and permissionlessness. However, there was concern, including from Satoshi, that this would bloat the Bitcoin blockchain, making it harder to do things like verify financial transactions, which were argued to be the primary or only use case for Bitcoin. And here's a quote from Satoshi: "Piling every proof of work quorum system in the world into one dataset doesn't scale. Bitcoin and BitDNS can be used separately. Users shouldn't have to download all of both to use one or the other." Interestingly, Satoshi didn't argue that alternative blockchains supporting non-financial uses shouldn't exist. An implicit acceptance of altcoins. I'm gonna digress on that, and I'm actually going to push back on that a bit at the same time, because I don't know if that's really an implicit acceptance of altcoins. All that indicates is that you can simply have other functionality that is simply not on Bitcoin. It doesn't necessarily, I don't know that it necessarily needs to have a token attached to it, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily need a token to be decentralized. Tor, okay, was decentralized and is quote unquote decentralized and does not have, well, didn't have a token until Justin Sun added the shitcoin to it, but it never needed a shitcoin. And that is the truth about that, because it doesn't need to be money. Anyways, it's okay. I don't want to muddy the waters that much, so I'll just continue on. He just argued that they shouldn't be on Bitcoin. True. Bitcoin, according to this perspective, should primarily be focused on financial transactions, and trying to do all use cases on a technology that fundamentally doesn't scale like a blockchain would crowd out the financial uses that Bitcoin was intended for. And that's what happened. BitDNS eventually found a home on a separate blockchain called Namecoin. And this was to the benefit of Bitcoiners today, who would otherwise be stuck, and this is the key right here, would otherwise be stuck downloading all the data of an ultimately failed DNS experiment whenever they tried to sync a new full node had BitDNS been built on Bitcoin. Okay, so you can see there was an uproar, but the point of the matter is that the free market spoke, and eventually it just wasn't useful or practical for this to be built on Bitcoin, and it went to a shitcoin. The debate endured. Should Bitcoin's ledger, 1, be reserved for recording financial transactions only, or 2, be a secure distributed data store for any potential application? Option 1 is more sustainable as Bitcoin grows to be a global financial network, given that blockchains inherently don't scale. Option 2 allows for more experimentation that could grow the Bitcoin ecosystem in the near term and provide miners with revenue that will be necessary as the block subsidy shrinks. Okay, so this is, again, right, we're making assumptions. Okay, we're making assumptions that there won't be enough financial activity on Bitcoin and the Lightning Network in order to support the miners. I think that's a dangerous assumption. I don't think that we know that that's true. Okay, we don't know this for 100% that that's true at all. So to me, it just seems right now like a very high time preference thing. Look, I know that people want to see, they think they want to see the shitcoin functionality because for some reason there's people out there who seem to think that if we don't have this functionality, that Bitcoin isn't what everybody says it is. But people need to realize, like, Bitcoin is many different things to many people, but at the end of the day, what does it do? It provides censorship resistant public ledger. If people decide that they want to use it for JPEGs and they want to pay to store their JPEGs on that network and it can support it, I don't actually consider that an attack on Bitcoin. Granted, I do think it's a waste of block space, but that's not really up to me to determine. And if I care so much about it, if I believe that this should be stopped at all costs, then what can I do? I could become a miner and I can start to censor transactions that contain ordinals. I can do something like that. I also heard the argument that, Bitcoiners are proponents of censorship now because of NFTs. So look, individual miners, they can do whatever the fuck they want. Whether you agree with that or not, that's your problem. Okay? That's totally your problem. You cope with that. And that's it. The miner, they can do whatever they want in this case. So if an individual miner decides to censor transactions because it has what they consider to be useless data in it, if they choose not to take that mining revenue over another mining revenue, I think that's honestly they're totally their business. I don't see how we have a say in that. All right, guys, we're going to continue on with this article. I just had to pause and give my piece before I just totally forget it. So here we go. From 2018 to 2019, approximately 20% of all Bitcoin transactions were op return transactions. These transactions were for things like Omni, the basis for the early Tether stablecoin, Counterparty, the early NFT protocol used for rare pepes, and Veriblock, an altcoin that settles on Bitcoin. Each of these relied on op return to function, and Bitcoin fees were quite high during this time due to their popularity. As before, proponents of these op return apps asserted that high fees are good. It raises demand for Bitcoin block space and pays miners to secure the network. Opponents argued that they crowd out Bitcoin's intended financial transactions. And there's a cool picture of the rare Pepe. I was totally blown away when I found out that these things were done on Bitcoin first, and it was done on Counterparty. I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy. Veriblock, Omni, and Counterparty met a similar fate as BitDNS. They have fallen out of use, and likewise, op return use itself has collapsed. Even rare pepes are now wrapped onto ETH. Despite this collapse, Veriblock and Omni added about 10 gigs to the Bitcoin blockchain in 32 million transactions that all Bitcoin nodes have to download forever. Thankfully, these transactions are at least prunable, so there isn't a memory cost given they aren't part of Bitcoin's UTXO set. And here you go. You guys can clearly see the chart. I mean, obviously, everybody stopped using it, and now you're most likely going to see a spike back up because of ordinals. This brings us up to the present moment. Op returns is hardly used. Bitcoin blocks aren't often full, and block space is cheap, yet this may be on the verge of being appended as a design quirk of Taproot. Remember all those people with the green squares? Everyone was excited. Taproot, innovation, more security. Hey, I remember. I was excited for it. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I wasn't. I'm like, yeah, this sounds interesting. Well, here we go. These are the unintended consequences of interesting. And again, that's if you don't agree with having ordinals. If you don't agree with it, then you see this as holy shit, this is a bad thing. Anyways, a design quirk of Taproot has allowed limitless Bitcoin data storage short the block size limit without using op return at all. This has been codified into a new NFT protocol on Bitcoin called Ordinals. The size limit of op return was intended to limit the ability to store non-financial data on Bitcoin. This limitation was set to 80 bytes, essentially a short string of text. Ordinals was only launched on Bitcoin mainnet a few days ago, and already people are storing not just images, but short videos and even a PDF of Satoshi's white paper on Bitcoin's blockchain. To reiterate, these aren't links to the white paper or video. The actual white paper and video are permanently parts of the Bitcoin blockchain that must be downloaded by all full nodes. Let's go take a look. Let's go take a look at some of the fallout. All right, now that we kind of understand a little bit better what this is all about, let's see what's going on with the Bitcoin Twitter fallout. Here we go. All right, guys. So we've got this interesting tweet where Luke Dash Jr. Chimed in. For the people that don't know, he's the Bitcoin core dev who, quote unquote, was hacked and lost 200 BTC. Not that matters. He's done a lot of other stuff, but I'm just saying that's most recently that's what happened, and that's where you may have heard his name. Okay, so here we go. It's a tweet originally by @Brian Micon. Hope I pronounced it correctly. Laugh out loud at Luke Dash Jr. Why are you mad about people using the protocol creatively? Could argue the JPEGs are doing more good than harm. Even if I'm wrong, it'll only be a slight negative, and Soda Popinski will finally be truly on chain. So I think we can all agree to that trade-off. In just a side note for the people who don't know who Soda Popinski is, he's a character from, I believe, possibly Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, which was a game on Nintendo from the 80s. Anyways, maybe I'll pop it up over here or over there. Let's see. All right. Luke's response, wrong. They're violating the protocol and users are right to resist. Okay. What makes it protocol violation? Could this have been prevented? It's claiming, and this is, and here's Luke's response to Red Rhino. It's claiming the data is a signature when it isn't. Spam will adapt to any environment. The only effective way to prevent it is to have humans actively adapting to it. Bitcoin outsources this to nodes and miners. So Brian responds, it isn't claiming anything. Protocols are rigid. Don't want that type of data usage? Change the protocol. These political campaigns over valid protocol usage are entertaining to me, but ultimately pointless. If people like it and can do it, some will do it. Wrong. There is no such thing, and this is from Luke. There's no such thing as changing the protocol in this context. The protocol already doesn't allow the data storage. Well, and this is Brian's response. Well, it seems you're mistaken, as recently people have been storing some JPEG data in the protocol. And then Luke responds, they are attacking Bitcoin, not using it. Brian responds and goes, we can agree they are creating valid Bitcoin transactions, right? Because indeed, they are having to pay the fee to store that data. And we're going to get to a tweet actually from Brian Trolls after this about the practicality of doing that. So anyways, Luke responds and goes, no. So Brian writes back, LMAO, then how are they included in blocks? So here we go. This is where it gets kind of weird. Luke responds by lying and tricking the code. Are you trolling or just stupid? Okay. All right. So I'm going to end it there because, of course, people started to troll him after that point because I don't know about lying and tricking the code. I'm not even going to go there. And I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't write code. So maybe he was saying that, but he was thinking something else, right? Like, that's possible. Not making excuses for him, just saying. I don't have any other way of explaining that because that is definitely not code speak. That is 100% sure. Okay, moving on. So we started to see tweets like this appear as well. Here's a tweet from Roy Murphy. All right. Might stick. Oh, I always love it when they say Bitcoin OG. Anyways. Might stick a 3 GB video on BTC and concatenate it into 6,500 KB chunks. Let's see if any non-mining Raspberry Pi home node can stop me. To which Brian Trolls retweeted, if my early morning napkin math is correct, this idiot's plan is to spend 7.5 BTC at 1 sat per VByte, so $172,500 to put a video on the blockchain. That is in the process is still capped per block by the block size. This is the type of stupid shit people are freaking out about. And you know what? He's absolutely right. I'm gonna end it on that. I mean the showing of the tweets and of the information, and we're gonna talk about this a little bit. So look, you guys see how often Counterparty is being used. You guys are all obviously using Veriblock and Omni, right? Crickets. So does this really matter? Because at the end of the day, it's whoever is using Bitcoin that essentially gets to determine if the feature set is there, they get to determine what data they are storing and how much they're paying for it. So as much as I this is where I kind of hit like a middle ground, because I don't give a shit about JPEGs. I don't care to pay to store them. That's ridiculous. That's my personal opinion. Now, should I be stopping someone else from doing this if they so choose to pay this astronomical fee of storing a movie? We claim, right, as Bitcoiners, we claim that we're all about freedom, we're all about freedom of speech, and that Bitcoin is permissionless. Well, if somebody put this feature set in and Bitcoin is permissionless, then we should let it fail. Then we should let it fail by its own virtue. The same way that Counterparty, and I know it sounds terrible, right? I'm saying Counterparty failed, but yeah, like to a certain extent, these other things that have come and gone, they were interesting for a time, and they have failed ultimately and disappeared. And in the end, they were just noise. So, okay, the other piece of it, the other piece is this, how this is being viewed as an attack on Bitcoin. This is where we go back to the idea that Bitcoin was primarily for financial transactions. Some could even argue that it's simply just a digital ledger. We simply chose to use it for financial transactions. Okay, so under the assumption that it's used specifically for financial transactions, then yes, I can see how JPEGs are an attack on Bitcoin, because it's a complete fucking waste of block space. But if we allow it, then it is not an attack on Bitcoin. It's really a perception issue. So you see, it's not really just, I know that people try to create these polarizing stances of like black and white, and like, yeah, you got to pick a side, right? Like this is something that I'm seeing, a lot on Bitcoin Twitter. You got to pick a side, and I don't know. I don't know if we have to pick a side. As of right now, I just see it as a function that's been added to Bitcoin that may or may not get used in a narrative war to push stupid shit, maybe, to push ridiculous ideas. Who knows? But do I think in the long run that this actually affects Bitcoin? I don't. I think that this is just a short story in Bitcoin's history.